Hey, and we're live. This Life in Tech. I almost forgot the name of the show. Number 157. I'm Jason.
And I'm TK.
Like, I was waiting for that phantom wisecrack that clearly isn't coming because Dan is traveling once again and it's just the two of us.
It'll be peaceful.
Yeah. See right there. Like I was waiting for it. Like
I know. It's almost like a Pavlovian response now, where you're waiting for the newspaper to hit you in the side of the head.
yeah, I was gonna say I feel like an abused dog. I don't know. Anyway, man, how you been?
I have been well. It was a good week. So
It was a
work
crazy
hard.
week for me, man. The end of we're going into the last week of the first month of the semester, and man, spring is busy. They packed February. February's packed full of stuff, open houses, which I like, man. I like going and talking to prospective students and freshmen and people that have committed to come. They just don't know what degree they want. I think it's fun, man. It has a good buzz to it.
I think I think right now, and I think a lot of it has to do just flat out with the expense of college, as opposed to 155 years ago, like Dan used to say when I went to college. Um, that I think it's a very big injustice to ask a 17 or 18-year-old to pick what they're going to do for the rest of their life and complete that in 4 years, right? And when you public education is a little bit more affordable, but especially a lot of the private schools. I mean, how much is tuition at High Point?
55 a year,
Yeah, plus, you're talking 70, right, for a student. So you're talking
probably.
the better part of 300 grand to get a kid an education. And if they change their major and add a semester, right, and so just the expense of that alone drives the behavior that we've got to know what we want to do. When my view is college is that first time where in a semi-controlled environment, you get to make adult-ish decisions, good or bad. Like, do
Yeah,
I go to class? Do I stay out drinking too much? Do I go on a date? Do I study? Right, all of those things, up to and including, I need new clothes. Why? Because all of mine are dirty. And then we have a discussion about how to do laundry, right? But I like University of Chicago. I don't know if they were the first, but they were the first university I heard of this years ago, where you can't pick a major when you show up. You can have an idea what you want to do, but you've got a core curriculum that exposes you to a lot of different things freshman and sophomore year. It also sets you up to complete the back end of these degrees in 2 years, right? Because they realized it was an expense thing. And when I went to University of Massachusetts, all in books, food, the whole nine yards, it was $6,000 a year,
right,
right?
right.
And if you changed your mind, it was an extra semester, big deal,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, I think one of the things where people always talk about things that are going wrong with college, and they talk about safe spaces and all that stuff, and we've talked a lot about that, and taking making a clearinghouse where dissent isn't really welcome, right? And some universities do that more than others. But I think the biggest problem now is that students just don't have a chance to explore and wander into a class accidentally one day and go, wow, this is really what I want to do, and then switch into what could be their life's work, right? I mean,
Yeah, you're
I think
right.
that, I think that should be the wonder of college, right? You know who Admiral Stockdale is?
I've heard the name, yeah.
He was an old commander by the time Vietnam happened, and he wanted to go back and be a squadron commander and fly A4s at the time. He ended up spending 7+ years in the Hanoi Hilton. Okay,
Hmm.
that's not the interesting part of his story. All right. Well, I don't think it is anyway. There's a PDF out there called On Courage, and it's about his journey leading up to being incarcerated and then his life story. He was courtesy of the Navy. The Navy, all the military, they like to educate people, right? And so they send people back to college to get multiple master's degrees, and they expose them to things that help get them to the next level and be a more well-rounded individual, right? And so he was there, and he was, I think, he was a mathematician, or that of that bent by
Right.
training and by love. And he accidentally wandered into a philosophy class, and it changed his life. He basically told the Navy, "Hey, I don't need another degree in anything technical. I want to go do this." And they were like,
Hmm.
"Well, all right,
Hmm.
fine, go do that." And so he fell in love with Stoic philosophy, right?
Yeah.
And so as he then goes and becomes the squadron commander, and he's flying A4s. And while he's flying A4s, he gets shot down. And in his words, the first thing he thought of, and this was all based on his love and deep belief in Stoic philosophy, that he believed while he was hanging under a parachute, all beat up after ejecting at a high rate of speed, the first thing that crossed through his mind was, I am the perfect man at the perfect time at the perfect place to lead these men through what is going to be the most difficult life-changing event they have. And we have to look at it through the context of back then, being captive, the only thing you were allowed to say was name, rank, and serial number. And that's not survivable, right? We know that now.
Right.
You know, one of the big changes of being captive and what you're allowed to do and what you're allowed to say and how we train people to deal with that was, you know, all those veterans that spent multiple years in incarceration and how they had to deal with it and how they had to overcome the shame of giving more than name, rank, and serial number. And it's a big psychology exercise. One of the things that I was fortunate enough to do was go to a multitude of these courses where you learn how to deal with arduous situations. But more importantly was to meet a tremendous amount of these veterans, right? In the Navy, I'm sure it's the same in the other sources, you have a little POW ribbon and they'll put a number on it. And that number is the number of years you were incarcerated. And I've met more veterans with 5+ as their number, 5, 6, 7. Right. And think about that. You live 70 years. And a lot of these veterans, they don't live that long because they have a good portion of their life, 10% of their life was spent not only being malnutrition or like that, but not receiving good health care or any health care, but also having the snot kicked out of them on a regular basis. And the psychology behind that absolutely amazes me. Right. One of them used to run the survival school on the East Coast for the Navy. And whenever they would talk about torture, the only thing he would ever say was, they can make you uncomfortable. Think about that as a statement, right?
Yeah, right.
And this is while they're showing students all the different drawings from all the different positions that they could use to exact pain, right? And then where that leads you mentally and physically to go there, right? And I think, but if you look, it all started, the modern way we contemplate this and how we ask people to behave with dignity, right, while they're doing this, is based on the fact that Admiral Stockdale accidentally kind of wandered into a psychology class one day, sat down, and it changed his life. Now we say, hey, college is $75,000 a year. Whatever you do, don't take an extra class or get out of line, or step out of line. Because if you do, it's going to cost me another $75,000.
Right.
And I'm not saying
it's a strain.
Right. I'm not saying parents are wrong for saying, hey, you got to get on this because it can't cost us extra money because we're already $300,000 into this. But that's the conundrum, I think, of big time education.
It's a hard problem because the accreditation board will tell you that you need X number of hours.
Right.
And then as a college within the university or a department within a school, whatever, right? You come together and say, okay, this is not only our accreditation for this type of degree. So like engineering has its own accreditation separate from the regional accreditation of the university.
Right.
And they have their block of this is what you have to cover at a minimum. And standards are good. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
And then you're left with, okay, well, what do I need in terms of courses and sequence of courses at various levels of rigor, whatever. Nobody agrees on what the hell that means. That's a whole separate show. to get you from A to B.
That's a whole separate podcast. That's not just a whole separate show. We can talk about that every week in a different venue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you're trying to imagine what B is based on what you know and what you think is going to happen. So maybe you have like an advisory board with industry people on it, whatever, right? And so the idea in this, as I've experienced almost the last decade, the idea that gets embodied is this focus on you're paying X to receive Y, and we need to be productive and efficient.
Right.
And what gets cut first is everything that's not geared towards driving you from A to B. And I don't know that that's good or bad, but what it definitely does is it gives you very little leeway to go between A and B and take these little diversive paths. That's inarguable. There's no argument for that. It actually factually happens.
I know, but I think the most important piece of that 18 to whatever, if you're a traditional student, you go right after high school, is getting a grip on the wonder of becoming a learner. Right? And whatever that takes, and going and find something that you never knew existed, right? And a lot of it, some of it is the school system you went to, but a big factor is, did you or did you not have parental guidance, right, in what you do?
Sure.
Right? Did you have an adult in school that said, hey, these things are important, or give you a fascination for something, right? Or did you have parents? And I'll use my story as a thing. I've talked about this, I've written about this, that when I went to school, or when I was getting ready to go to college, I was good at math and science. So my parents were like, major in electrical engineering. Now, that's from the prism of two Depression era kids, that you go to school, you get a degree, that something that you can get a job with, right? And a well-defined job, right? And to my mother, whose worldview ended at the mailbox because she was a stay-at-home mom, something she could go tell the garden club that her son was majoring in electrical engineering, and it sounded really good to them, right? And so there was a certain amount of hubris that went along with it, just like my dad's job title mattered to my mother. That was the time we lived in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, right? So I got there, and the University of Massachusetts Lowell, to their credit, is for the dollar, rated the best value for engineering in America, right? They do it well. They started out, it's a crappy campus on a crappy location with housing on one side of a river, the campus on another side of the river, and you got to brave the elements literally in the wintertime to get to class. You got to want to go to school. They had two separate campuses, in North and South. That at the time when I went there, I don't know what goes on today. So, you Lowell crowd, don't at me. There was no service, there was no bus service or anything like that. You had to figure out how to get there, and it wasn't 500 yards apart. Right, it was on opposite sides of town, right? And if you were a tech major like I was, you had the North Campus, and if you were an arts or anything but tech, you were on the South Campus. So even taking an English class meant you had to go to a different campus, right? And so when I got there, in short order, I was like, electrical engineering, it doesn't excite me. It doesn't do it. It wasn't hard. It wasn't easy. It just was boring to me. It was really boring. And so I started to explore. And what I was doing was I was hating school. I was hating the campus. More importantly, I was starting to hate myself. Right? Yeah. Because there's a cycle of self-loathing that goes on with that. I remember I went home one weekend, and this was after, again, not to the Stockdale S thing, but talking to people that were in different ways, people that were happy being there, right? Because I was not. And strangely enough, most of my peers weren't either, but they were like, man, this is a really good education. It's thing. And what they were doing was parroting what their parents told them.
Yeah, right.
And over dinner, I finally got up the courage because, I wasn't one to talk back to my parents back then, or ever. I did it once when I was 15, and my dad hit me with a briefcase and knocked me down, and that was the last time I ever talked back to my parents, right? But I over dinner, I said, I want to be a classics major, and I want to transfer to Holy Cross. My mother looked at me and she goes, why would you ever major in anything where you couldn't get a job? Or because she couldn't imagine what you could do with it, because the job, the major had a title, and that title led to a well-defined, safe career of white picket fence and everything like that. Unbeknownst at the time, I was talking about wanting to change the world, right? Because that's, when you start talking about the gross sum of history, you're saying, hey, I want to learn what happened so I can make a positive effect. I didn't know that at the time, but 30 plus years later, that's what I believe. And I think that there are, we talk about all these useless majors. Like when you hear the crowd of, student debt and people majoring in all these different things, major in whatever you want, major in whatever makes you happy and makes you productive, and try to have an eye that on something you can get a job at. But being a major, pick one. I don't care what it is. And people are like, oh, that's useless. You'll never be able to get a job. That's not true. right? Your ability to go become employed is intrinsic in you. It has nothing to do with your thing, unless you're stubborn on saying, I want to get a job doing X, right? But
Right.
if you're saying, I want knowledge for the sake of knowledge so that I can be better prepared for life, you're going to go find gainful employment. Now, have you amassed $300,000-$400,000 of debt in an undergraduate program? It's one like Dan talks in the student debt that he has. But the student debt he's accrued is to get him to be of a higher position, making more money. Right? He understands.
Yeah.
He understands the trade-off he's made, and I think that's a good one, right? But
well, it's a lot like investing in your first house in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? You just it's going to pay off. You just got to stay alive long enough to see the return. Really, it's what it comes down to. And don't wreck it. I mean, but that's one of the things why, as much as I love technology, I really like teaching computer science at a liberal arts school.
yeah,
I've taught at 2 polytechnics, and I didn't have problems with it. It's just the nature of it is slightly different. The context of it is different. I wish it wasn't such an internal struggle, because this is what it comes down to, speaking from the university side. So I'm in a computer science department that's in a school of engineering, and we have resources allocated to us. And part of that resource allocation, like any business, is based on need and demonstration of demand. Well, we don't have the student population, being a brand new school at the university, that arts and sciences has.
right.
Of which, and then you have the religion school, and so you get this internal struggle with the academic silos of, well, we need these resources, you don't, and there's like this battle of, like right now at High Point, the struggle is with the gen ed, and it's exactly what we were talking about in the beginning. You only have X number of hours between freshman and senior year. How do you spend them? And of course, the status quo, the power based on population, is on the liberal arts side. And we don't have as much of a voice because there's not as many of us over on the hard science side, engineering, that can say, well, you ought to have a basic like technology class as a gen ed requirement, because we don't right now. Nobody has to take a technology class unless they're in a technology-based degree program.
Which is
in 2020.
I was going to say, it's baffling to me, and we've talked about this in the show before. The university, or the state of North Dakota, because they have a governor who's built and sold tech companies, and like for not a little bit of money. In fact, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, credited him through conversations with him and giving him the vision to drive Microsoft deep in the 21st century. He's created a program of K through PhD, where everybody in the state that attends public schools at every level, from, like I said, from K through PhD, will have some level of cyber training, right? Because and I truly this, we're a great nation of app users. We're not a great nation of app developers, right? And it's not that you have to go be the next big, great computer scientist or app developer or web dev guy, but understanding how it works in 2020, I think, is hugely important. All right, there's no getting around that.
No, and I think, at least when I think about it, and we've talked about it, I think that is the answer to break out of this silo. Because right now, I think about my daughter. She's 5, and if she were in 5 years, 10 years to come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, what should I major in?" Well, just like you were talking about with your parents, you're naturally going to want your kid to do better than you.
Right.
How did I do so good? Well, working in tech. Not with my English undergrad, right? And so you're naturally going to play to that strength and say, well, baby, maybe you ought to go think about a STEM career because they pay really well. The way to break out of that vertical, because that's what's happening right now, and that's why people have this opinion that anything non-STEM is worthless, when it's not, is to diffuse STEM across all the other disciplines to the point where it's just part of it.
Right.
It's just part of it.
But you brought up a great point. Like you said, you act like an enterprise, right? You're acting like a business where you've got allocation resource based on demand. The one thing they're not doing what I heard from you say is they're saying, hey, we have a new vertical. And when you have anything new, you've got to pour a disproportionate amount of resources in it to make it successful sometimes. Right. And so and a lot of it is, what's the ad campaign? What's the marketing, right? How is High Point now marketing this newfound computer science program and how it fits in the university lexicon. What I would say, and this is one of the great things my father told me, because I don't care what you major in college. He goes, I prefer you don't major in education because you'll work hard and you'll never be compensated correctly, which he was correct. He goes, but that's what you want to do. Go ahead and do that. Just understand what you're getting into. He's like, but whatever you do, you're going to major in English. He goes, I have more developers than I know what to do with at General Electric, and only 4 of them can write down a complete thought of how they're getting there. And so I did.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing. When I look back and I think, like right now, close your eyes, and this is America, whoever's listening, close your eyes and go, who was the teacher, high school, college, whatever, that changed your life? That, like, off the top of your head, first person you think of, where you're like, you made such a profound impact on me that it changed the way I thought about a certain thing that's made me better today. I have one guy in high school, Harry Mitchell, and then I have Dr. Bill Coughlin in college. Both of them were English teachers. Never, it was, I was a science guy, right? And the first day of English class in college, it was, English 101. It was all engineering majors, and he stands up, and I think he was a Vietnam vet, SF guy, but loved English. Like, it was his life, right? He wasn't like he was just doing it because he's like, all right, the GI Bill paid for me to go get a degree in English. He loved it. And he said, look, I know none of you engineers want to be here. You want to go be studying math and all the stuff you have to do to pass your engineering classes. But I swear to God, if you give me the same level of effort you're in this class that you're putting into thing, you will be in a different place for the rest of your life. And it spoke to me, right? And it spoke to me because when I was in high school, I had another English teacher that basically said ostensibly the same thing, but how you would say it to a high school kid, right? And until the day I joined the Navy, I used to go stop by Harry's house all the time. Even after we retired from teaching, we'd all, and sometimes it was like a revolving door. I'd be walking in and another student would be walking out. And that's the profound effect. And it wasn't about writing. It wasn't about reading, right? It was about a love of language and what, words matter, right? You hear people say that all the time. Words matter. Well, how do I know which ones matter and in what order and how to think? And largely what I do, aside from, casually running a tech company, is I speak and I'm out in public, and it's about storytelling. It's about capturing people's imagination in a truthful but artful way. And if I didn't have those two men in my life, that thing, and think about what you do most of your time. I mean, it's a little bit different for you as an educator, but I spend a lot of time writing. Right, even at work, like, in growing, like when I was in the military, after a while, you're writing fit reps, you're doing everything, and looking at some sentences and going, oh boy, right? You know what I mean? I get what you're going to say, but you're not articulating that, right? It's the old, I hate this kind of crass, commas. It's the difference between helping your Uncle Jack off a horse and helping your Uncle Jack off a horse, right? And a lot of, and we don't place enough emphasis on that. Right. And I think that's hugely important. And my dad was a very black and white binary dude. He's like, you should be able to pick whatever major you want in college, and every kid should have to minor in English.
Yeah.
Because he felt that feeling about it. Right.
And to some degree that exists. It's called writing across the curriculum, but how it gets implemented is very subject.
Well, I think it starts earlier and more so in high school. Right. And I think it comes back to the standardized testing, right? Because my belief is early on, they gave a standardized, when they started this thing, they wanted to test. Ultimately, you want to get to a point where you know that your teachers are competent, right? That's the whole purpose of this testing, right? Well, in Massachusetts, one of the first states to do it, they gave this big comprehensive test. They started with high school teachers. Well, most high school teachers, like you, they're subject matter teachers. They're not like a K-8 program where you're a holistic teacher. And so a lot of them failed. It didn't mean they were incompetent. It means that this math teacher doesn't know U.S. history anymore because it's 30 years from now, right? And so rather than do that, it gave the union the ammunition they needed to say, no, we're not going to do this testing. It's silly, right? I'm a big believer that one of the most important things we can do is educate the next generation. And as such, if you want that to be properly funded, and white collar professionals, which I think education should be held in that same high esteem as doctors and pilots. Like, would you get into an airplane if you didn't think that guy had gone through some sort of remedial training on how not to crash the thing every so often? Right? Same with doctors, same with
Right.
So why aren't we asking teachers to submit to standardized testing? It's a money play, it's a union thing, and it's human nature, right?
Mhm.
My father said years ago, it should be whatever subject matter you teach and English, because the only time you get corrected on English should not be in English class. And I totally agree with that, right?
Mhm.
Everywhere you go, you should have everywhere you go in education, you should have a functional knowledge of English to correct other people's grammar and sentence structure, especially how do I use English in a technology world as opposed to how do I use it when I'm storytelling? Those are two different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be very precise and declarative in everything you do when you up to and including getting your doctorate in IA. Whereas if I go tell a story, how am I wrong? I want to alliterate more. Right? I want
Yeah, right. Right.
If I don't, I'm allowing you to make up your own scenario. And that's not the purpose of a good story.
Well, both are hard in their own right for their own reasons. It's something that takes practice. I mean, we're not born speaking, and we're certainly not born writing. I mean, I'm going through this with my daughter. We're just teaching her how to read, and she read for the first time at school on her own. And thankfully, at least this school, because you get to give them permission, when they do new things like that, they'll film it for you and send you the video, which is glorious, man.
That's awesome.
No, it's great. Yeah, it's great. It's a Baptist church. Put that together. And they run it like a Baptist church. But hey, man, I'm there for the academics. And so now she's starting to acquire this ability and gain some autonomy. But man, she wasn't born with that.
No.
She wasn't born with that. That's a hard skill that still a large percentage of the world does not get, learning how to read. Yeah. That again, this is why I go back to I like the liberal arts approach, even though I'm a STEM person. I have a liberal arts background. I went to a liberal arts undergrad. I got a liberal arts degree from a liberal arts undergrad. It's super valuable, man. It's super valuable. Basic communication. And this goes back to something we've talked about before as we segue into Huawei and 5G and tech. It's learning how to communicate effectively with yourself, first and foremost, to me. And that's what things like Stoicism, and that's what things like the liberal arts, if you break it down into the trivium and the quadrivium and how those worked in the ancient Greek system.
Right.
That's really what it is. It's really how do you effectively communicate with yourself, whether it's yourself in the past and you're remembering, yourself in the present, or you're trying to communicate most often with your future self. And then other people just flow from that. Man, that's not easy. Well, a lot of people don't pick that up.
It's totally not. And I did a podcast recently with a buddy of mine, and we talked at great length about this. And this was a guy that's known me for probably going on 25, 30 years now, another retired SEAL. And you're right. I don't know how it happened, but, from reading philosophy and stuff like that, and then going into how did I gravitate towards kind of what I call fixing myself, right? If you look now, when folks get out of the military, there's all these great transition programs, and they're amazing. And I support one of them heavily. But when I retired, you didn't have any of that. And I got out, got a good job, everything was going fine. And then, throughout things, you have some ups and downs. And so I had a down period. And I got angry, right? Because you do that because it's like you have 20, 30 plus years of riding high. And then, or what you think to be riding high. And so then you have to get introspective, and that's hard, right? And I kind of gravitated more towards Eastern philosophy, more Hindu. There's a great monk out there. They call him the monk with a MacBook. His name's Dandapani. And I heard the guy on a YouTube video, and I remember 3 minutes, and he just started to quietly speak to me, right, in a way that I hadn't before. And when you talk about, you have to be able to talk to yourself. I had inadvertently been telling other people to do that, in business, and saying, hey, I want to hear all your good ideas. And they're like, well, how do I know what the good ones are? And I used to tell people, walk into a bathroom, whenever, with a mirror, and stand there and look at yourself and talk out loud, like I'm talking right now, and look at yourself. If you look away or you laugh, it's not a good idea, because your body, when you try to lie to yourself, your body goes in conflict. Period. Trust me, from experience, it goes into conflict, right? That, hey, everything's all right. I got it all together. And I'm talking about those types of lies to yourself, right? I'm not talking about the, hey, you're rakishly handsome lie, right? I'm talking about the real ones, right? And but once you start having those conversations with yourself, well, how do I get there, right? That's where people really start. How do I start that conversation with myself? Well, Donapani says this, and I totally agree. And I use this all the time, is, we're really good as a nation, as a group of people today at being distracted. You know why? We practice it a lot. We practice being distracted an insane amount. Well, if I want to do something and when we first met years ago, hey, you'd come out to National Harbor, and we have our choice of who we go hang out with for lunch and dinner. Right. And we would get break into smaller groups, and we would, left to our own volition, we would get to know people, and we get to know each other better every week. Why? Because we spend time talking to each other and getting to know each other. Well, do that with yourself. Right. Spend time with yourself. No phone, no nothing. I tend to put my noise canceling headphones on, so whatever's going on in the house can do it. And a lot of people call it meditation. Right. But that's creating a conversation with yourself. The problem is, where does, when the squirrels and the stray voltage starts flying in, and how to create that discipline, right? And that's the trick. And I started out, it was 3 minutes, then it was 5 minutes, then it was got to a point where I could do it for an hour, right? And start having these conversations. And guess what? My life got a lot better. It didn't intrinsically, right? And it didn't get a lot better because somebody else helped me out or some situation grossly changed. I changed me, and the world changed. Right. And I think,
you know what
I mean? That's, the world didn't change. I looked at the world differently. Right. And I truly believe that if you're angry or fearful, you can't do anything great. Right. That's your big inhibitor. Right. And Donapani says it like this: you have energy. Like, you go to sleep at night, you wake up in the morning, you have all the energy you're going to have in the day. And it's like a big force vector in physics. Right. I can shoot that big line out. Well, if all the stray voltage of those are little vectors that go off to the side, and the more that happens, the less forward throw you have, so to speak, right? And a lot of it is where your focus is at. And Donapani says it like this: is think of this. You have in your mind, you have everything that you think about: love, hate, work, sex, kids, wife, lovers, haters, girlfriends, boyfriends, and every emotion. And so and then you have energy. And where you focus that energy is what you're going to be thinking about. So when somebody now says to me they're angry, I go, you're not angry. You're just focusing yourself on a place called anger.
Yeah, right.
But it allows, in the way it works for me, is it allows me to retract and go, okay, what am I doing? Now let's focus on something positive. Right. And I think,
and you're really not angry with something external. You're really disappointed in yourself almost all the time, right?
Right. But you know how that works out, right? You're on the horn in the car, you're doing these other things and everything like that, right? And so is it perfect? No. But you know what it is? Like, once you know intrinsically how to fix it, it becomes better. Right. And you lose ego. And I saw a great saying the other day: ego never hears the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
and once you get rid of that, and you become self-effacing, you're going, hey, I don't know everything. And really, what do I want to do? Right? What do I want to do about it? And so again, this is 55. We were talking about, well, how do you do it when you're 18?
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? And you get to a plateau. A lot of folks get to a plateau in their life. And I see it when I talk to folks all the time, is you'll get people in my age group that are really senior level executives, and all of a sudden they're like, holy smokes, this is not what I thought I was going to do, where I was going to be, and now I'm here, and like, ta-da. And how do you own that, right? Because and I think it is being very transparent, and in cases like this where you have the opportunity to say, look, I'm better off today than I was yesterday, and I'm going to be better off tomorrow because I'm going to work at it, right? And
exactly.
And it becomes part of your day. And I've heard other folks that talk about this. They'll talk in terms of, look, I'm not asking you to commit an hour, right? Because even I can't do that every day. But if you get out of bed and you start with 10 minutes, right? You say, hey, Here's 3 things I'm grateful for. Here's the people that that I love in my life, and I want to celebrate them. And then here's 3 things I'm going to do today. And it's not out in the ethereal. You own it and make it yours, and then you move on with your day. And usually those 3 things are the top 3 things I do not want to do.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Because the other stuff is easy. If you don't want to do it, that's the stuff you got to do. Right? Because that's good.
Well,
you're from good to great.
Yeah, and I think this is part of one of the things I don't like about technology is, and this ties into what we were talking about with education, particularly in the STEM verticals. There's so much focus on productivity.
Yep.
And being productive. And we've allowed that as a society to mean getting a certain number of things done within a certain number representing time. Right. And so the basic equation is such that the more you get done within a given time, the more productive you are. And I think that's categorically wrong. And it's why we've started to lose some traction in the liberal arts. To me, I think it's better, and this is kind of what we're dancing around as I hear it, and tell me what you think, is productivity is, am I making progress towards my stated goal? However much that is, it doesn't matter. Right. You're the one measuring that. You're the one setting those bars. And so for you today, if it's 10 minutes, and for me today, it's 5 minutes, we're both being productive towards our aim. Maybe tomorrow I'll get 65 minutes. Maybe you only get 3. Are you making progress towards your stated goal? Yes or no? And that's, to me, what productive ought to mean. And technology can help us. And I think we ought to learn better how to use technology to remove distractions, not create it. But it's really a subjective thing that you have to be in touch with yourself to evaluate.
Right. I think what you're talking about is this. It took, Edison said, hey, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I found 1,000 ways that a light bulb doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Right. And so was he being productive? Well, in some measures of how we consider it today, it probably wasn't, because he just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And it's like, there was this amazing period of time, and then ta-da, we got light.
Right.
But it comes back to me, when they say fail fast, right? Mm-hmm. Fail fast has nothing to do with time. Fail fast has to do with dream big, dream large, and step off the edge of the cliff and catch yourself, right? And understand that you can recover. And it's how Elon Musk runs the company, right? Runs his companies, right? You can't be great if you're not taking giant leaps, right?
That's right.
If you kind of dovetail that with Microsoft Delve, right? It can be this grossly intrusive tool in business, and Microsoft uses it this way, where you have to be meticulous about filling out your calendar, and they match your calendar up with your conversation, with what the productivity is in your OneDrive for how many documents you're doing and everything, and they come up with a productivity score, and now you're either productive or not based on what, right?
Right.
I heard a great story this week on television. Sean Payton, who's the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, was talking about technology, which is, I find that this is the fascinating thing about football, and what some of the things, like I was not paying attention to football, and all of a sudden they were telling me that running backs were accelerating up to 21 miles an hour when they went through a hole. I'm like, okay, how are they doing this? Right. Well, how they're doing it is now they have chips in the pads, and they have a chip. So they have a little chip in the football. So now they can quantify all this, right? And so they were in large measures, they want to be efficient in practice. They don't just want to be efficient with time. They want to be efficient with soft tissue injury, because that's the leading thing that keeps people out of the game: sprained ankles, rotator cuffs, and everything like that. So they want to be efficient with that. And so they're trying to match activity to outcome, right? So that they can get the most out of the limited practice time they have without hurting players during the middle of the week. And he said after a while, he came out and he looked, and offensive linemen, for those people that don't watch football, they're their own tribe within the offense. They don't talk to each other. They don't talk to anybody else. They hang to themselves, because everything they do is a coordinated dance. It's like the square dancing of the football, because their left feet all move at the same time. Like one guy does something, the other guy has to do it, and they are intricately interconnected. Say that 3 times fast, in getting things done to protect the quarterback or make holes so people can run. All right. And so he came out and he looked, and all the offensive linemen are just walking in a big circle, almost like, but they're autistic and they're just out there like in a field just walking around, right? And he walked over to him.
Yeah.
He walked over to him and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And they're like, "We're just out here getting our productivity scores up." They weren't doing anything productive. They're all smart guys, and they just figured,
Right.
if we walk around and we're in motion and we're all doing it together, right? Because that was the key, because they're in proximity to each other. We're all doing it together. It looks like we're practicing. So now we're more efficient.
Well,
Is that like that to me is like the ultimate of how we're cheating the system, right? I love it.
well, and I love it, and I love it because I'm sure there was somebody when they thought of setting that metric at whatever it was, never considered normal human behavior, which is to gradient towards what makes it the easiest.
Right. I mean,
You can call it cheating. You can call it whatever you want. That's how human beings behave. And we'll do it every single time.
see, especially like when you start talking about sports or things in the military, here's what the stated goal is, right? How do I get there the quickest with the least amount of pain?
That's right. That's
Right.
right.
And how, if you're going to make a team, like if I got 53 players, you got X amount of offensive lineman spots. How do I stay on that team and make a lot of money?
Yeah.
Right. I become.
Well, yeah, if I'm a consumer, here's the segue. If I'm a consumer and I have $500 to spend and I need a new mobile device, why am I going to buy the most expensive one? Because if I spend the least amount of money, I got more money left over. Now I can go have a steak dinner or whatever, right?
Right.
And so you get into this situation where this is our transition to talking about Huawei devices because they are cheaper. And at least if you read the reviews, they're not bad devices. I've personally never owned one. But yeah, there's this incentive of, and I think in cyber, we lose track of this, particularly when we think about users, quote unquote. We don't think about somebody's motivation is to get their job done so they can get paid and go home and be with their family. Their job isn't to think about, is this device spying on me?
I would say 10 years ago, I think you're correct. Today, it's so prevalent in the news that I don't know how you own a smartphone and you aren't aware that there's a privacy issue with it. Right. I think that we've really we've jumped the shark, and not in a good way. Right. When, I saw an article about the revival of the Clipper chip, right, the other day. And I thought, I thought we put that out of its misery 20 years ago. Right. But specifically with Huawei or Huawei, however you want to say it, right? I think people now, especially when it comes to mobile devices, because mobile devices are no longer a utilitarian tool, right? They're a fashion statement. They're a statement of vanity. They're of how much money, And if you're an Android person and you want to say I'm thing, you typically go out and you buy a Samsung device, right? Because they're at the they're the apogee of Android devices. Or you're an iPhone person, and a lot of it is about what you perceive to be value. Right? Because value causes you to ignore common sense that says, hey, I can spend $599 for a OnePlus, right? Which is a badass phone, or I can spend and get the same, effectively the same tech specs and go buy a Samsung device.
Right.
That's it. And a lot of people now, I think, are in consumers, I'm not talking about enterprise, consumers are gravitating away from some of these phones that have their own skins on them and all their own environments, because Samsung has stated, especially in enterprise, they don't want to be a hardware dispenser anymore. They want to be a solution provider. And how do you transition from that? You create your own ecosystem. Well, for me, that ecosystem is truly effing annoying, right? Because I've got to deal on that Android device with the Google ecosystem, and I've got to deal with the Samsung ecosystem. And I'll tell you a quick story. So recently, my daughter has to do volunteer hours for school, and so there's a assisted living facility for older folks that she goes and volunteers at for different types of tasks. And I hadn't been over there with her before, and she had volunteered. They asked if she could come and help older folks with their mobile devices. Well, if it's an iPhone, she's great because that's what she owns and she knows everything about an iPhone. Well, if it's an Android phone, probably not so much. So I said, I'll go with you. And we sat around. We sat around for probably a good 2 or 3 hours, right? And helping these, they were great. they were inquisitive. They wanted to know, but the folks that had Samsung devices had the most problems because, okay, are my photos in Google Photos, are they in Samsung Photos? Is it in the Samsung Cloud or is it in the Google Cloud?
Right.
And it's not like you can easily turn one off and remove it from, from view. Whereas if you look at even like the Huawei phones, all the non-standard brand phones, they'll give you a cleaner Android environment. I think Huawei is going away and they're going to have their own. They'll have their own version of Android. Their own baked version of Android now, sans Google, right? But what you're going to get is you're going to get one homogeneous place for your photos and everything like that. And especially if somebody's, like I do, I use G Suite. This isn't the Gmail with all the ads and stuff like this. I'm creating a more secure environment. And then now do I want to introduce that into Samsung? Probably not. Right. And it becomes really hard. So people make decisions and it's been less in the US, but globally, you can go get a quality Android phone for $200-300. Does it do everything that flagship phone does? Nah. Does it have to? Right.
Right. That's a good question.
Right. And that's somewhat of the vanity of, first world problems. And, what's the big conundrum with Huawei? Right? It's their link to the Chinese government, and to what level are they using their from handsets to infrastructure to monitor the countries that they're installed in, right? And that I think is the real is the real problem, right? And it's what we see in the news and everything all the time. If you look at 10, 12 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, that when the whole smartphone thing took hold in 2007ish. They were wanting to get phones, and those phones were demonstrably cheaper than everybody else. And the prevailing thought at the time was, I can get it on there. Now I can spy on those people. And then they said, well, wait a second, why do I need to do it one at a time and only with Huawei devices? Why don't we just start really pushing our switches and make them demonstrably cheaper and encourage, cash restricted carriers and everything else to use our device, our infrastructure over everybody else's. And that's when all hell broke loose with the Intel community and governments and things like that.
Right. Well, see, that's what amazes me. And this is kind of at least for me, and the way I think about this problem space is the same way we talked about users.
Yeah.
Pardon me. And back to education, in that there's a gradient of incentives, and I'm here and I want to get over there. And I'm going to normally gravitate towards the easiest solution to whatever problems lie in between A and B. And so whoever is on the other side of that equation operates identically. We know that. I mean, they're human beings too. And so if you stop using their phones, or they can't get market penetration with their mobile devices, of course they're going to switch to something that, it's easier. I'll just slurp it all up at once. I'll put my compromised chips in the routers. How about that?
Right.
And now no matter whose device is on that link, I can see it if I want to. And somehow I think there's this mass perception that it's just that company with that device. No, I don't think that's true. I think that's just the nature of the world we live in now. I'm not judging it. I'm trying to make as an objective statement as I can about it. I just think that's the nature of the world we're in. And I think we're stuck trying to catch up and figure out not whether we should do it, because it's already done. That's behind us. Now, how do we integrate with it? How do we use it? How do we live in a world that operates like that?
I would look at it like this. Yeah, you're going to have that, right? I can't control every device that's out there that my device comes in contact with and connects to, period.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? I can be encrypted from end to end.
Mm-hmm.
I can control that, right? That's the fear, right? Is now we can locally as consumers create a condition where we're encrypted, VPNs. And we can argue about the quality of VPNs and stuff like that. But this is about hurdles, right? And I want to create a larger hurdle. So there's a lot of quality consumer grade VPNs. Do I think they're hack free? No. But what am I doing? I'm raising the bar. I'm not that guy, right? Hey, there's somebody on Starbucks internet that's not doing anything. Well, okay, let's go after them. They're easy. Oh my goodness, that's an AES 256 VPN. I'm going to leave that alone right now. Right? Why? Because the level of effort to F with me is pretty high, right? And so at the same time where everybody is bitching about in the US government, and everybody's bitching about Huawei switches and all their hardware, they're also advocating for a backdoor for encryption for the government, right? And I look at encryption, especially on mobile devices like this. I want this. When I was a kid, and if I was out in the street, my dad saw me talking to another kid, he had to physically come up and ask me what I was talking about with that other kid. I was consenting to give him the information. What the government wants, in particular lazy law enforcement, is they want to take away consent. They just want to be able to crack in there and go, let's go. Right. And if you don't like it, then they're gonna, now we want to make, and we get another 2 years of a Congress that in my estimation has done zero productive. I mean, they kept the wheels on the cart with the budget as much as they had to, just because you have to do that. But now there's arguments about like wanting to, ban end-to-end encryption. And the funny thing is in Virginia, you got Senator Warner. Senator Warner made his millions. He became a millionaire in the nascent days of mobile devices by setting up cell phone infrastructure. And now he wants to ban end-to-end encryption. Or not ban it, but he wants to be able that the government can just unlock it. How quickly before something smarter than whatever the government can do can unlock it as well? I mean,
sure.
There'll be nanoseconds behind that.
Yeah, right.
Right. And for those, the at-me crowd that says, well, if you have nothing to hide, then why do you have encryption? If you have blinds on your house, please shut the F up.
Well, this is the thing. So we've never really gotten deep into this. I have with Dan over time, but I tend to have different opinions about privacy and encryption, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, like I think we should stop encrypting everything immediately. Stop for various reasons. That's a whole nother show. I think we should get rid of privacy for various reasons. A whole nother show. What we can agree on is the sentiment that you don't need those things because you have nothing to hide is nonsense.
Yeah.
Finish the statement. This is human behavior too. Finish the statement. You don't have anything to hide now based on the size of your worldview now. And what you're being ignorant of is that the need to hide something isn't based on your wanting to hide it. It's based on somebody else's perception of why they want it. And you're not in control of that. And so if you allow a framework in which people can bypass consent to access whatever it is, it has nothing to do with whether you want to hide it. At that point, you can't choose to hide it anymore. And that's the problem.
I think that's part of the big social media dilemma, especially with kids, right? Anybody that watches this show for more than an hour knows that my daughter plays basketball and she wants to play basketball in college. And so as you start to navigate that system today, a big portion of it is the first thing they do, if she reaches out and emails the school and says, hey, I might be interested in coming to your school. Do you need my skill set? The first thing they're going to do is go look at her social media.
Yep.
Right. And as a high school girl, if she's in there in, bare midriff clothes, we can argue about whether that's important or not, but that's what they're looking at. Do you make controversial statements on social media? Do you use foul language on social media and all those other things? You have to be attendant to your online reputation today because you have the ability to reach a global audience. And what do you want that to look like? You're already telling people, hey, I want privacy on my terms, right? That's the social media thing, right? I want to put stuff out there, but if you find me interesting or you find me distasteful, I don't want you to look any further than what you put out there. And that's not human nature, right? It's just human nature. Because if I find something that you do fascinating in the real world, I want to get closer to you. I want to talk to you. I want to find out what it is because I might learn something and that's important to me, right? But if I find you distasteful, it's the old thing. Like when people say, oh, we got to stop people from talking about racism. We got to stop people from talking about the Klan. I want somebody with a sheet on their head every day of the week on the news espousing what they believe for the simple fact that's the quickest way for everybody to go, oh my God, we can't have that. That's abhorrent. Right?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and that's how we don't get rid of bad behavior by saying, oh, we're not going to talk about it, and that therefore it doesn't exist. Right? We've got a governor right now in Virginia that has a picture in his yearbook. It's on his page of somebody. It's either he's one of the two. We haven't figured out which one yet in the state. He's either in blackface or he's wearing a Klan hood. And he's still the governor, right? You know, Robert Byrd. Robert Byrd was a senior senator from West Virginia. In 1954, he was the super wizard, grand dragon, whatever it is when you're in charge of the Klan. I think in 1954, we knew it was more than a social club.
Yeah.
Right? And yet, you know, get out every day and allow people to talk. Because every time you ever hear anybody in any extreme group open their mouth, you're like, oh boy. Right? It's never good. Like anybody that's attracted to that, you got to go, okay, good. Now we know who's who. Right? And I'm a big believer in advertising. If you're a racist, bigot, dumbass piece of crap, you know, let's get it out there. I want to know who those people are. Right?
Sure.
And we'll hold everybody accountable to that same standard. Because I don't believe you get rid of racism, or I want to leave every Confederate statue standing. Why? Because I want people to look at that and understand what that's about. Right? And or anything that people now are finding abhorrent, and we're trying to act like we want to rewrite history by pulling these statues down. You can take a physical object away, but you can't change what's in people's hearts. Right.
And it's kind of, I think we would agree, it's foolish to think that you can change things by pretending it's the same and it's not there.
No,
you know what I mean?
La 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 la. That's effectively what you're doing, right? And that's
right. And you're refusing to shoulder your personal responsibility in helping that situation.
Right.
Be different.
And that's with everything. I mean, I think when we start, it's easy for everybody to get a grip around racism, right? Because when you see it, you know it when you hear it. Right. And you even see it now, just when some people get loose in the news, like they're mad. Right. That's just like somebody said, it was something incredible. It might have been the N-word or whatever. It was something incredible. I didn't see the statement, but I saw the rebuttal. And the rebuttal was, well, oh man, I'm sorry. It was the heat of the moment. I was angry. Okay. That's the time where the true you comes out. Right. I hate to tell you that, but when you're at your very worst, your primal urges take over, and at the deepest, darkest place of what you believe comes out of your mouth and out of your being.
You're right.
Right? Sorry. Yeah. That's it. Period. And please at me with that one, because I want to have that argument. Right? And so, you know, you can't apologize for that. Like, you're not like, get off the stage. Right? And it absolutely baffles me when people like, you know, I'm not big on the cancel culture, right? Because I want people to have dissenting views, and a lot of times I have a friend of mine, JJ Redick, who's a basketball player. A buddy of mine, I sent him a video from Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and he sends me back. He goes, "I can't watch it because JJ Redick blocked me." And I'm like, you know, John Q. Citizen like got blocked by this really famous dude. And I go, "How did that happen? What did you say?" And he goes, he was espousing that we should have open borders and let everybody in. And my friend's a police officer, and obviously for a lot of reasons that he holds very dear, his response was, "Oh, that's a great idea. Are you going to personally pay for it?" And he got blocked. Right? Like, okay, so now we don't allow dissent. Right? And that's
exactly.
And it wasn't like that's a legitimate question. Hey, if you want this outcome, right? And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. If you want this outcome, what's the price tag? Emotionally, financially, physically, everything. And let's have a long form thought, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
With the cancel culture, you don't get that. If I don't like your opinion, or it's not advancing my agenda, I want to get rid of you. And we do it at the speed of light. We do it at the speed of light with these things.
Yeah, because that's the most expeditious way to solve that problem.
That's the most expeditious way to give somebody the electronic finger, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's kind of like the theme for this week in tech, I guess, that's why you can say that the often what you ought to do isn't what's the most expeditious. It's what has the most meaning. And I think that's how, to go back where we started, right? That's how you start to have good conversations with yourself. Stop doing what's easy and fast and start working on the things that are hard that have the biggest payoff long term. And that's how you set that aim, and you just work towards it. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 60 minutes, doesn't really matter. Why are you keeping score? Like,
Well,
you know what I mean?
like I said, some days, I think in everybody, if you want to get to a point where you're self-effacing and want to truly work on yourself and be better tomorrow than you were yesterday, right? It's like anything else. I want to be a better tennis player. I better put a tennis racket in my hand for a significant period of time and do positive things, right? Because I'm not a big believer that practice makes perfect. If you're practicing something badly, you're just going to get better at being bad at it, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Perfect practice makes perfect. And if I'm diligently, some people buy into the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, right? Back in the day, I watched Cooper go over 10,000 hours of doing Linux, and he went from being really good to being elegant, right? Yeah. And it was diligent, perfect practice, right? And right. I think some of that, if you buy that, let's say that we do agree on the 10,000 hours, some of that 10,000 hours is finding out what doesn't work.
Sure,
right? A big part of being good at something is having a big bucket of, hey, I know that doesn't work. And I think that's huge. When you're in this, you try to become self-aware and go on a journey to say, I want to be the best me I can be, that it runs down to, hey, these are all the negative things in my life that, I might have thought I wanted to do that or be that or act like this, but for me, that just doesn't work. And I'm not being my authentic self. And right. And once you get to that, and now you can start working on it. And now you can start truly having perfect practice. Because I tried to practice being an extrovert for 20 plus years when I wasn't, and for disastrous results. Right. Yeah. I laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny. Right.
Sure. I'll leave us with this. This is the way I look at it. There's debate around what 10,000 hours means of practice. Mm-hmm. I don't think the idea itself has no meaning. I think people fixate on 10,000 hours and they think magically on the other side of that line or something. Yeah. And this goes back to that whole idea I was talking about with productivity, right? And so I look at it like this, and this is how I try to explain it to people or advise them to look at it. You start with a worldview that's this big, and this is the young kids that come in as freshmen. And you don't know shit because you haven't lived long enough yet, right? So as you live and you're spending 10,000 hours, let's say, at something, what you're doing is incrementally increasing the size of your worldview such that you've had enough experience at that marker that there's enough variables within that activity that you've experienced that you know how to react to it and control it and use it. And so like sports are a really good example for this. 10,000 hours of practice at a sport doing a thing is really going to advance your skill at it as long as you're doing perfect practice, or let's even say moderately good practice. Mm-hmm. And part of it's muscle memory, part of it's the behavior, the mechanic, the biomechanics of it. But I think a big part of it is learning how to do that thing in lots of different conditions.
Right.
And you're increasing the size of that worldview. I think that to me is productivity. Just increasing your worldview 5, 10, 60 minutes at a time.
I think I'll use sports as a kind of an analogy for life. The more diligently you practice at something under different scenarios, the more likely it is that when you are under the game stress, whether it's at work, sports, or whatever, when you're under that game stress, that you'll be able to more quickly have that Rolodex of what works and have multiple answers to the problem, and you can try things, right? And you see this in athletes, right? They don't do the same thing every time when they're confronted with the same conundrum of being in front of an opponent, right? Why? Because now that opponent starts to get some muscle memory about what you do, and when they get the ball, they always go left. Well, if you go right every now and again, now they've got to stay neutral, and they can't shade to one side. It's the same at work. I want consistency of behavior. I don't want consistency of outcome always, right? Because that's growth, right? I want to know you're not a psycho, right? And by saying it, you can be angry every day or you can be happy every day. But, being civil every day isn't going to help me out, because I want to know, and people's personalities are who they are, but try to be even at that personality, right? And that's going to be growth for you. right? And then find within what you're comfortable with as a personality type is saying, how do I grow within that and become better? Because now you're being true to yourself, and now you're a more productive member of that tribe that you're in.
That's right. Amen. All right, man. So I want to try something new to finish this. Watch this. Hold on one second.
What are you doing?
It's just you were talking, and it dawned on me that this might be something. 1 second. Oh man, we got to do this every time. A little summary at the end of the episode, and then I can cut that and make it its own little video as the intro, and then we can have little links to our little topic. So this is what I think we talked about.
Contain your big brain. That's what we have going on today.
So, we started with, I don't even know how we got started on it, but we talked a good bit about, and it made me think a little bit about some things, education, and the idea that, the liberal arts aren't worthless. We ought to know at least how to read and write effectively and understand what situation we're in so that we can do that.
I agree.
I think, yeah.
Everybody
dude.
Today, while you're getting ready to watch the Super Bowl, you're going to watch Groundhog Day at least once, because it's going to be on for 24 hours, very fittingly. But go look up Dead Poets Society and start getting some things, because a lot of things that were said in that, like the words matter, right?
Yeah. And then we talked a little bit about the idea of spy tech via Huawei and this push for 5G and how you integrate with other people and where encryption and privacy matter. And, I think we're in I've said this before, and I think really you and Dan tend to see it the same way. We just have different ideas on how to get there. We're in this really precarious intermediary state and how we integrate with these things. And I don't know. I think that's part of the fun. I think it's part of the scary part too.
I ask people this, especially because I'm up in DC all the time. You get the government crowd, and they have their certain views on encryption and how they're protecting public safety. I go, great. I want to know the same information about you personally. I want to know it that you want to know about me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
yep.
With another job, we were trying to do some encryption stuff for a nation and their surveillance system. And if you have law enforcement and there's not enough law enforcement people to go around, they start installing cameras and everything else, right? And one of them was in one of the major cities in that country, an unbelievable amount of cameras focused on license plates, right?
Yep.
And I only had one question when I was like at their ops center watching it. I just looked around at everybody in the room. I go, is any one of your license plates in that database? And they were like, of course not.
Of course not.
Right? And that's
right.
Hey, I'm above the law, right? My stuff's not in there. Right? And
well, it's also good.
I want to know. That's what I want to know. I want to know what we're above the law about, right? Who is deemed to be above that, because those are the people I really want to know what's going on.
Well, right. It's the same thing in summary. We were talking about, I don't need encryption or privacy because I have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
Well, I don't need to be monitored because I'm not the bad guy. Well, wait a minute. Now, maybe that's true. But what about tomorrow when circumstances change?
Everybody.
Who defines what's bad?
Go down to the personal level, and what other people think about you is none of your business, because there's two things in life. One, there's a chapter in everybody's personal book that they don't read out loud.
Oh, yeah.
And two, you're the bad guy in somebody's story.
Of course.
Right? And with those two things alone, all you need to know is, hey, nobody is completely self-effacing about their personal story. And people get pissed off when other people don't like them because you're the bad guy in somebody else's story. And
that's right.
When you translate that to what we claim to be the real world now, that's why encryption exists.
Right. Well,
that's a nation state statement and everything else, right?
Oh, yeah, right. And so maybe in the future, and I would like to have Dan on for this one because he has some interesting views too.
Yeah, he does.
And I think it takes a diversity of views to really figure this out because they're big problems. We're all human. We're all running the same race, and none of us are getting out of here alive, fundamentally, at least not for now. And so I wonder what it's going to take to figure out how to use what we have right now, which I think is super advanced. All the technology we have is super advanced, and we're trying to figure out how to use it like toddlers. Um, really, we are in a lot of
Great
ways.
statement.
I'm speaking about myself, dude. I mean,
No,
right?
that's a great statement. I dig it.
How do we stop collecting license plates with the idea that we're going to find people to punish, and start collecting license plates, including our own, so that we can all keep each other honest towards whatever aim we've stated? And we're here to help each other be better instead of focusing on using it to tear things down. Now, look, I understand that there's bad actors, there's bad behavior. We have to keep each other honest, and I'm not saying that shouldn't exist. We don't live in a utopia, and I don't think
Right.
it would be good if we did. But I think we can do a hell of a lot better with what we have.
I'd start with this because traffic cams are a thing now, right? And the intersection cams, like who's running red lights and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people run red lights?
Whew, if I had to guess, they're in a hurry.
No, they're self-indulged. What I have to do is so important that the traffic laws don't apply to me.
Sure, I dig it.
And what I see now, because I've done it, there's one intersection in particular I go through all the time, and it's a hotbed for red light cameras. And you'll see there's two groups of people. There's the people that slow down thinking it's going to change to yellow and they start. And then there's the people that Indy 500 get on the gas and they want to get 3/4 of the way through so that they're not in the frame of the camera potentially when the light turns red. All right.
Right.
People, and it's also the people that stay in the fast lane, right? We have the company I'm at, we have a patent, we have a tool on how to make traffic more efficient, right? But it relies on people saying, I want the whole to be better, so I'm going to move over.
Right.
And what I've found, and this is just anecdotal by looking inside a car when I drive past it, because the behavior fascinates me. If the speed limit's 65, you got everybody going 65 in the right lane, what we determine the slow lane, and you have somebody that's 65, and they're like, well, I'm going the speed limit. But you're also not the moral speed police to hold up anybody else.
Right.
And so is somebody just getting by them because they don't want to be behind a big truck because they can't see, right? Or they feel uncomfortable in that environment. They're trying to change so they can be more comfortable. I'm all for people in 3,500-pound weapons being comfortable at a high rate of speed, right? But I think most of it comes down to the fact that people are always vested in their own self-interest, and to start giving things, sometimes you have to in order to, the old thing, in order to get the kingdom, you have to give it away. And people want to hold on tight to their little bit of control in life. And if I'm behind that car, I'm controlling the speed. And if I want to, because I've heard it before, like, well, you don't need to be going that fast.
Oh, right? Yeah. Like you're the arbiter of speed.
I mean, it's funny because like I had gotten a speeding ticket going, I was breaking the law. I was speeding. I got a speeding ticket. And now every time I'm going 5 miles above the speed limit and I watch somebody drive past me like I'm sitting still, I'm like, where's the police officer? Right? I don't get mad about it. It's like, it's almost like an internal joke to myself. Like, wait a second. One time I get out because I'm trying to get past one of those tandem tractor trailers because it looks like the thing's going to start doing this and we're all going to die. I get pulled over. Right? And you just got to take it. Right? And, but you look at that, and I drove from here to Charleston, and like when you're in North Carolina, you're not breaking the speed limit. Well, you're free to do it, but you're also free to accept the ticket. When you get south of the border, have you driven like to South Carolina yet while you've been living there? On 95 in particular. When you do, you'll see south of the border about 100 miles before, and you'll start seeing the signs for the big sombrero. And then there's it's like the Eiffel Tower, but there's a big sombrero on the top of it. When you get there, you can see it for miles, right? And you have an observation deck on the sombrero and everything, right? Fireworks and bad food is what you can get there. But the minute you cross over, I don't think South Carolina really cares how fast you drive. Maybe it's because the next exit after that's the Darlington Speedway for NASCAR, right? But here I am, speed limit 70, and I'm going 75 because if you go 80 in Virginia, it's reckless no matter what the speed limit is. And so I'm going
Yeah.
75, and all of a sudden everybody's driving by me, and I'm like, I feel like I should be leaning into the thing like some old lady looking over the top, right? And
Yeah.
but that's like I try to look at social behavior and look at individuals' behavior and how they feel, because people want to exact some measure of control in their life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the less you feel you have control in your life of yourself, you're going to go out and get it in some adverse ways, right? And
Yeah.
out in sports, yelling at refs, right? Yelling at a referee from the stands. It baffles me, and parents do it all the time, and it's crazy, right? And when I was growing up, hockey fights, parents would go on the ice. I mean, there was a guy sitting in prison for the rest of his life now because he jumped over into the coach's box afterwards and punched the coach in the face and killed him because he was unhappy about the playing time for his child, right? That's
Imagine.
what level,
Yeah.
right? What level of control do you feel you have in your life? And right, if you don't feel you have any, you're going to grab onto it in very weird ways. And a lot of times, I think it becomes a traffic issue.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great, in summary, conclusion. People will do what's most expeditious in most cases. And once you start to understand that and you allow them to speak and display that, you can start to understand how the world works better. I think it's a good thing.
No, I do as well. And I think it allows you to be more comfortable, right? Because
exactly.
Get it off your chest, brother. Like,
yeah, let it out. Let it out.
Keep talking, right? I'm doing a radio interview in DC this week, and the guy was interviewing me. You remember Alex? He was our facilities guy at Silent Circle.
Yeah.
He's a talk show host in DC now. And
oh wow.
Yeah, on one of the FM channels and stuff like that. I'll get you the link if you want to listen to it. But he and I, like socially and everything, probably disagree on everything, right? But you know what we really strongly or in violent agreement about? How you treat other people.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were talking back and forth, and he's like, hey, he listened to my podcast and like that. He's like, hey, why don't you come on the radio show and we'll talk? And I think it's going to be amazing, right? Because we have whether it's how we elect, which politicians we want to elect and things like that, what social outcomes are, how governments try to gerrymander social outcomes. And I'm not, this is, with no regards to party or anything, but I'm looking forward to that because if you agree on something as important as how you treat other humans, the rest of it then becomes, you can have a discussion about it.
It's largely academic at that point. It has meaning, but it really is just, well, where else can we find common ground?
Right, because what you get in politics right now is, well, if you don't agree with me, you want to harm a certain subset of the nation. No. We want to get to the same place. We just violently disagree on how to get there.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right?
By disagreeing, you're not by default the enemy.
No, and I think that in life, nobody wins. No, nothing's 100-0.
No.
Right?
No, it's not that easy. It's not that easy.
My dad said, marriage is 50-50, just not every day of the week. And the quicker you can figure out when it's your turn to be 90, and the better your life's going to be. And that's a life. That's not a marriage thing. That's a life thing, right? In every relationship, if you want to be a person, a giver, right? I view life as there's net takers and net givers, and I do not do net takers. I don't do them. I'm like, no, you're wrecking my day. Then you have to say 90, giving 90 is okay with me. In fact, I relish that. Right? And you're not hurting my feelings. Like, what do you need from me today? Right? How can I help you? Right? And some days you're like, hey, all I got's 80. I'll give you that. Right?
Right.
But it's about getting out there and giving. And I think that is where we've so gotten away from that with this agenda-driven garbage that we do in politics now. And with that, ta-da, a Danless week. We have to get,
I think we'll have him again.
We have to get Dan and Ian on here, go 4 wide, and just let the chaos. You and I might not get a word in edgewise.
That's all right, man. Sometimes you just got to sit back and watch the demo derby.
I was going to say, there'll be more F-bombs per minute than and the first 20 minutes will revolve around all the F-bombs of Ian having to get up early. I can't believe
he said he's on board.
I can't believe as a parent, 8 o'clock in the morning is early to him. As a parent of a toddler.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Megan,
his wife Megan's a saint, right?
I've never met her.
Well, I did it.
I've heard great things about her. I think I saw a picture one time, but
remember when you did the Spy Museum event years ago?
Mhm.
That's the first time I ever met her. And I walked up and I said, "Hey, I'm TK." And she turned around and she punched him. And she's like, "You lying sack of crap." And I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "For the past year and a half, every time he comes home drunk and he's late from work, he blames it on you." So, I had to go out drinking with the boss tonight. And I'm like, "Really?"
had to.
Yeah, I had to, right? And she's like, "You're off the hook, dude. I wanted to meet you. I was getting ready to yell at you." I said, "There's no way that you do that." And so I was like, "Yeah, there you go. Blame the old guy."
Yeah, right. He says he's down once he moves into the new house, so he has a space where he's not either being interrupted or interrupting them. Which, hey, man, I understand that.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's why my office is outside the house, but we'll get them together at some point.
All right, everybody, have a good week.
All right, everybody, have a good Sunday.
Out.
Thanks. Bye-bye.